formal structure for this. It's just a casual chat about family history. This is Julian Laffey. Now I'm talking with Catherine Laffey and Alice Robertson, nee Laffey. It's the 22nd of April 2006. I'm not sure how to begin this. I've got a list in front of me of people and how they're related to Alice. It's 3 pages. Nephews, first cousins, grandnephews, great-grandfathers, etc., etc. I suppose I'd like to get a bit of the old history about your parents and grandparents and what you know.
Do you remember Grandad Miller?
Yes.
What do you remember about him?
I remember him being a very strong character of a man, a lovely old man, a man who had to rear his family of, how many were left?
There was 8, wasn't there?
8. Yeah, 8 left, but 7 left because the baby was taken by a cousin of his wife to rear over at Burrenbeat. But they used to bring that baby, that was Uncle Arch Miller. And they bought that baby. He was only, I think, he was only 9 months.
10 months old.
10 months old when his mother died, my grandmother, died of a tumour on the brain.
So this is Mary Miller's mother?
Yeah.
Her name was Anne Stewart?
Anne Stewart Miller. And she died of a tumour on the brain. She was only 32, I think.
Your mother remembered being taken in to see her when she was dying, didn't she?
I'd never heard that. She might have told that to you, did she? Yeah, I never heard that. But she was only very young and he was left, and he did a wonderful job with those 6 children that he reared. But there again, I think the eldest one was Bob, and then Stuart was next, and they were 18 and 16, I think, at the time. So they were sort of off his hands, but they still helped to rear those younger ones. And, there were, and then Auntie Jin came in there. She was only 16, and she took that baby Arch to her heart.
Who was Auntie Jin?
She was Mum's sister. She was 16 at the time.
Right.
And she took that baby to her heart. And the story goes that when the cousin came over from Burrenbeat, the mother's cousin came over from Burrenbeat, who was childless, her and her husband, to take Uncle Arch to rear him, she ran with that baby down into what we call the cabrins. They were gorse bushes. And she ran down there and she hid with that baby.
This is the Bald Hills.
The Bald Hills. And she ran down there and hid with that baby because she didn't want them. And from that time on, she hated that woman that took that baby, which was natural for a 16-year-old who had reared that baby for 3 or 4 months, and who'd lost her mother, and that baby was great. This day and age, it would never have happened.
That's right.
So the baby was Arch.
Yeah, and he was reared by this Mrs. Stewart and her husband. Now they were very good to Arch, and they determined that baby would never lose contact with his brothers and sisters.
Could I just stop you there? Reared by Mrs. Stewart?
Stewart, yes. She was a first cousin of old Grandma Miller.
Right, okay.
Yeah, she was.
So.
Yeah. David Miller's wife, David Miller's sister-in-law she was.
Right.
So then every Sunday from that year on, even when they were adults, every Sunday Arch Miller was brought across in a gig over to see from Burrumbeet to Bald Hills to see his brothers and sisters from the time he was 9 months old. So he never lost contact. And he was a lovely man, wasn't he?
You'd remember going out there, wouldn't you?
No.
To the farm at Burrumbeet?
No.
Auntie Lou and Uncle Arch?
No.
No, they might have been too young.
Yeah.
So could you list the brothers and sisters for me?
Yeah, well, Bob was the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
Robert. Stuart was the next one. Who came next? Jean.
Yeah. Is that where your name came from? Your middle name?
Alice Jean, yeah. Mary. Who came next? John. Or Jack. Uncle Jack. Leslie. And Arch.
What about Doug? No, wait on. Who we missed? The one.
5, 6. No, that's 7.
Oh, you've missed one.
There's a whole
Oh,
stack there I haven't got.
Nell. Ellen. Ellen came between. Between Uncle Les and Mum. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So there were 3 girls and 5 boys.
Yeah, they're 8 altogether.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about
So
your
that's-
mother's, sorry,
No, you're right. You go. Oh,
I think you about your mother's early life, the stories that she told about working down at Rosewood Junction.
Oh yeah, well you see, they all, well, Auntie Jean got married and went off to Melbourne. Auntie Nell got married, she went off to Melbourne. Uncle Bob, but the males in those days, you didn't worry about them too much. He married one of the Cliftons from Creswick, that was Uncle Bob.
mm-hmm.
Uncle Stuart was married, he married Jessie Taylor.
Yep.
So they sort of all went off. Uncle Les never married, Uncle Jack never married. So Mum never married, and she was left home with the grandfather, her father, and her 2 brothers, Jack and Les. And so she more or less had to keep house for them. This is years after, of course.
She's a young adult at this stage.
She was a young adult at this stage, yeah. And then the Depression came, didn't it? And Auntie Jane was in Melbourne, and he was out of work. Jim Capuano, he was out of work. And
He was working on the wharves.
he was working on the
And
wharves.
they ran what was known as the bull system. And that lasted for a long time. And the wharf was a very, very awful place to work.
Yeah.
And they would turn up for work in the morning and they...
Told there was no work.
No work.
Oh,
Or
right.
there'd be you and you have got to work today.
Yeah.
And the rest would be
Rest
sent
we go
home.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were and there was no social security.
No, not
So they were
those days.
starving.
Yeah, they were starving. And Mum used to tell me how she used to even... Oh, no, that's jumping the gun there a bit.
When they go down to see them, they take food.
Before Auntie Jane had trouble. Auntie Nell was down there, her and Doug Benson, and they lived there. He was on the wharf. And Mum used to say how she used to, in those days, she was up there and they had little farmlets where she had a couple of cows where she used to milk the cows and get the cream and make the butter and that's the way they lived.
And they
had a
were
lovely
self-sufficient.
vegetable garden and
And
sustenance.
Yeah.
And that's the way they lived. But she used to go off down to Melbourne to her sister Nell, and she'd take a case, and she'd say there'd be no clothes in the case. The case that she took down on the train would be full of homemade butter and vegetables and whatever else, eggs and God knows what, to take down to feed Auntie Nell's starving lot.
But that was actually before the Depression really hit, as I recall, because simultaneously Mary knew your father, Tom, and his first wife.
Yeah. Oh, she did, yes, yeah. Yeah, it all overlaps though, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but now this is where it needs to be unpicked a little bit. This is what Julian's looking for.
Yeah, but
So
I can't
Mary
think
knew
what
Tom
year.
and Veronica.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she was great friends with Veronica. Veronica was a very good friend of Mum.
And tell you all the story about when she was having that last
baby.
the fourth baby, which was a little boy.
A boy, yeah. Well, Mum said Dad apparently was away working on one of the farms or something, and Mum was a friend of Veronica's, and she said, I'll keep an eye on her, because she was just about due.
She had the three little girls.
She had three little girls, you see, and
The oldest
they
would be
lived, I don't know what the situation was, but they lived up in the bush.
They lived on Hollowback.
Who did?
Tom.
No, they lived up. No, they didn't. They lived up the other side of the railway line, because Dad used to. He had a eucalyptus oil thing. You know where they used to make the oil out of the distiller, and that's where he did it up there. They lived up there on the other side of the railway line. Mama said.
Oh, Tom always said they lived on Hollowback.
No, that was the generation before.
Okay.
That was the mother and father lived up in Holland.
Mary somehow was home this day and knew that Veronica had gone into labour.
Yeah. So she went up there and with the horse and gig, and kept an eye on her, and apparently, she came into labour. So Mum took her into the Creswick Hospital, and as she was going through the gate, she said to Mum, Mary, you should be coming in here, not me.
And she...
In other words, to say you should be a mother for the fourth time instead of me, And apparently it was Al Sleeman, I think. I don't know who the doctor was at the time. Mum said it was Sleeman. Oh, it wouldn't matter anyway who the doctor was. But in those days they didn't know what went on, And she burst.
She died.
The baby came.
Yeah.
Both mother and child died.
Right.
Both died together, you see.
So this would have been late 20s, sort of 28 or something.
No.
Shit, no.
About 23,
Years before
23.
that, darling.
Okay.
Lucy,
That
Lena
not-
and Molly were born 1920, 21 and 22. And she would have almost certainly been pregnant 23, 24 in the 19s,
Yeah, years
So-
before that.
So, I guess I don't know much about this, which is partly why I brought you together to find out some of this. How did Tom and Mary end up getting together?
Well, you see, Mum used to go up there, I think, to look after the kids one stage, and then, now whatever.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
What happened to the girls after Veronica died?
Two aunts, the aunts in Melbourne took Lucy and Laurie. And then the other old aunt,
Do you know who they were?
yes, this old bitch here, she took Lena.
Alice refers to photograph A.
Catherine completely dissociates.
She took Lena. She really took Lena. Oh, look, like I could write a book, but I really
we're
don't
trying
feel
to.
like
That's
it.
what we're trying to do.
And she took Lena.
So, in fact, Thomas William became kind of like a single
Thomas
man.
William was bloody weak.
Yes, I know. We've had this discussion. That he virtually became a single man, didn't he?
Very selfish man.
Yes,
I don't care what you say.
Yes, he was.
I loved him because he
This
was
is
my
your
father.
father.
Yeah,
I loved him because he was my father.
Yes,
But he was still a selfish man.
yes, he was. Self-centred.
Yeah, self-centred.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shouldn't have been, but he was.
So it would have been in the 20s that Mary, because he was single for about 7 years, wasn't he?
Yeah,
You were
7
born in
years,
30,
yeah,
1930.
yeah.
So they would have been married in 29. So there would have been about a period of about 6 or 7 years where he was single. So how did they? They would have known each other around the district. She went to work in.
They knew one another for years.
Yeah, I know. But she went to work
at the mental home as they did in those days.
They did. That's right.
And that's where they sort of got together.
Yeah.
So where was Buck Laffey? Was he farming?
No, farming, no.
Look, Julie, you learn to put up a lot of scar tissue with your art. Just don't let it touch you.
No, I'll tell you what, no. Him and the grandmother, Joanna.
It's his mother.
His mother, who he called the mater. Never referred to her as anything else but the mater. Him and the mater, they came in to live in Howard Street.
She bought that house.
Yeah.
In 1231.
Yeah, 1231.
Where I would remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mary.
Yes, that's right.
Marnie.
Marnie.
Yeah, Marnie.
Yes.
Yeah, no, not Marnie. Mary. Nan. And so they lived there, and I've lost the train.
I think he would have got a job at the mental hospital.
He did, yes.
Which would have been
on
very,
the farm.
Yeah, which would have been very good work because it was public service.
Public service.
And he would have probably been, because he'd worked around the district doing a lot of things, he would be a very competent man. And those farms at the mental hospital were completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
They grew all the food that the patients ate.
And they had pigs, milk.
They had milk. The whole lot was grown.
Is this what I would call lakeside?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And he eventually became the farm manager.
Yeah. Which was a good job.
It was a very good job. And you're quite right. Mary worked as probably a ward attendant.
Yeah, she was. She was a ward attendant.
Okay.
And they would have known each other for years before he was in.
Okay, he's about 40 by this stage, isn't he?
Yes.
Born in 1888.
Yeah. That'd be about right, yeah. Before that, Mum had sort of, when Grandad said to Mum, I remember Mum saying to me, Grandad said to Mum, Jean and her husband and the family, they're in diabolical trouble in Melbourne because they with the
early years of the depression.
The early years of the depression. And he never had a job.
Yeah.
And he said, I think we better bring them back. And that was Mum's, let's face it, that was Mum's outlet. She could get away. Because before that, she was tied with those three men. You know what I mean?
She was
they were good to her.
She was housekeeping for her father and
her two brothers, her two bachelor
Mary
brothers.
Miller was.
Yeah,
Right.
but they were good to her. They were, she never did without Ethie. She used to have her cows, and she'd sell her cream and everything, and her eggs and everything. And every year she went to Flemington to the Cup. Every year.
Yeah.
She went down to the Cup. And if she didn't go there, she went down to see her sister with a case full of goodies out of the garden and everything else, So she sort of, and then it was her outlet. She could get away. So that's the time she went to Cressy and worked
on the
it was a railway.
The railway junction was
there, and she worked as a house.
And it was awful. She was exploited terribly. She didn't last long.
Yeah. But then she came back and she got a job at the Becker home,
which would have been regular income.
Yeah.
So she's not well. This is a person. Neither of your grandparents would have been well educated.
No,
they'd have been lucky if they'd done grade 7, grade 8. It wouldn't have been any more than that.
No.
And that was the way it was.
Which is a bloody shame because
both very sharp people.
But not only that. But what about Bob and Stuart?
They're all very bright people.
Yeah.
So they married. Now Mary wasn't a Catholic. That family, the Millers, didn't. They would have been Presbyterians.
They were Presbyterian,
Right.
And
but they weren't strict Presbyterian.
She turned Catholic and she and... Now, whereabouts were she and Buck married? Was it at St Pat's?
Melbourne, I think, yeah.
I thought they were married at St Pat's in Ballarat. Mum and Dad were married at St
Butterfly,
Pat's.
no.
Yeah. Anyway, Alice was born. And you were born prematurely.
I was,
Oh, yeah.
yes, very much.
If I can just backtrack a
So
little,
work that one
little
out.
bit.
I worked that one out.
Well, they're married
Let's
back in
face it.
birthday.
No,
Let's
no,
face
no,
it.
no,
Now,
no.
I'm saying now, I was a love child.
Yeah,
Oh, hell.
that's all right, but that's not news.
No, I'm not, I'm not
Alice,
ashamed of that.
but you were born prematurely.
I was 2, yes, I
Yeah,
was. I was
not-
born
not-
prematurely
not
as well.
Yeah.
I was very premature.
Were you expected to get married if you fell pregnant?
Oh, yes.
That stage?
Yeah.
No question.
But I was so premature it wasn't fun.
Either that,
I was only 2 pounds.
Yes.
I think, 2.5 pounds.
Oh,
but
okay.
either that, Julian, or a baby would be given up for adoption.
Right.
It would be that simple. Yeah. So we're
Yeah.
glad that they married.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have had you.
If I
Yeah.
can just backtrack a little bit, what do you remember about, or what do you know about Mary's father?
Oh, Dave.
David.
David Miller was a wonderful man. He was a great character.
Hmm.
He reared those kids, and he really
What was
That's
his
not-
profession? What was his job?
farmer. Well, I don't know, itinerant worker. Oh, nothing. Came out here. No, he didn't come out from Scotland. His father did, I think.
And I think Anne Stewart's father did too.
Yeah.
Tom told me, and I don't know whether you've heard this story, but she's the Stewart that goes back to Culloden.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's that. Culloden was where the terrible fight between King George I's soldiers and the Scots took
Yeah.
place, and the Scots were annihilated. They were just massacred.
Yeah.
When was that? Was that?
Either in the 18th
six-
century,
I thought
18th
it was
century,
Earlier than that, I
or
thought.
the 1700s, I think.
1700
Yeah.
something, yeah.
And
Culloden.
she, Anne Stewart was one of the Stewarts from Culloden.
S-T-U-W-A-R-T.
Yes.
Not the S-T-U-A-R-T. S-T-U-A-R-T was when James II came on the throne.
Yeah.
It was termed
Married
as
Stuarts.
G-U-A-R-T, which was the Catholic
Right.
version of Stuart.
Okay.
But they were S-T-E-W-A-R-T.
I don't know whether you remember
Uncle
Dad.
Stuart was S-T-O-W-A-T.
I don't know whether you remember Dad used to wear a tartan tie occasionally. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's because you've got the right to wear it because there is that dissension, isn't there? Right.
Yeah,
through?
yeah,
I mean,
it is, yeah.
But it's like these children have got the right, as you have, to be called Child of Eureka.
Yeah. Now those, but then again, I'm going back to the Millers. You see, the Millers came from Scotland. They came from, oh God, I was there. What's the name of the place? Oh,
I can't help you, I don't know that.
oh. Now, but go on, ask one question.
Mum, you mentioned the Eureka connection.
Oh, I don't know,
Which
your
side?
father
That's
was on into
That's
that.
on my
That's on that
side.
side.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Well,
this
I
stage
might
we-
come back to that another time.
Yes,
I don't
yeah,
want to.
no, I agree
don't
with
wanna
you.
scoot over it.
No.
I guess tonight I want to concentrate on the
The
Laffey
Laffey
Miller
Miller
side.
Yep, quite right.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your life as a child with the 3 older sisters. Were you all together in a family? Were you separated?
No, not
What's your memory? What have you been
Not
told?
all together, no. You see, there's where religion comes in.
And a great
Mum.
injustice.
Eh?
And a great injustice.
Absolutely.
And a great unkindness to
When
those
I
girls.
come to it now, you know,
I'll just quickly stop you. I just want to ask one tiny little quick question in between.
yeah,
The girls went to St Arn's. You
Yes.
said
Yeah,
on the Wallace side
yeah.
or on the Laffey side?
on the Laffey side.
On the Laffey side. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Go
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
That's what you were going to say.
Now, you see, now, where am I going to start here? My mother was a very kind-hearted woman, as we all know. but she couldn't possibly stand up to 3 aunts of your grandfather. No, 3 sisters of your grandfather.
Were their personalities like his?
Oh, very formidable.
Formidable.
Right.
Now, because Mum wasn't a Catholic, she said...
Mind you, she turned Catholic at this stage, for what it mattered.
Yeah, didn't matter. She said, I love those girls. She said to me one day, she said, you know, I love those girls, but she said, I've never been allowed to have them.
And the funny thing was, later, they regarded her very much as their mother when they were mature women.
When they were mature women,
she would have loved to have had them.
You never shared a familial home?
No.
I wasn't
Tom,
there.
your father and I did, you see.
But they came to visit.
And they were always visiting. Yeah. I mean, we would have loved to have... I used to cry when was a little kid, when Lena, the younger one, had to go back to Lexington Street to Auntie Alice, who I hated. I hated that woman. I really did hate that woman. You shouldn't hate anybody, but I did. And Lena used to go, and I'd say to Mum, oh, why does Lena have to go home? Oh, well, she's got to go to school. She had to go to school because she had to go to St. Columbus, didn't she?
Mm.
It was too far down the road, you know. But your grandfather, he wouldn't stand up and say anything.
But she was
I
also...
thought you said they went down to Melbourne.
2 of them. That's Molly and
Lucy were in Melbourne.
The 3 little girls are split up.
So 3 of them were split up.
3 girls, 3 homes.
Yeah,
right,
no, 3 girls, 2 homes. Lucy and Molly were reared down in Glen Iris with Dad's sister Molly, this one here, Dad's sister Molly, this one, and her husband. And Lena was reared with this old bitch here, who was a half-sister of your grandfather.
Who's that?
Alice Laffey, Alice O'Donnell.
That's Alice and that's Molly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Lena was reared with her, and she was reared with these 4 boys that gave her no, Tom didn't. Tom was lovely. But the other 3, they gave her a dog of a life. They really did.
She was treated as a little skivvy, wasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. And I used to cry every time that Lena had to go back. Lena would come up on a Sunday, and she spent a lot of time with us, and she'd walk all the way from Lexington Street to our place. And I'd say, but Mum, why does she have to go home? Oh, well, she's got to go to school, because she had to go to the Catholic school, didn't she?
Now, Lena is Carmel Hempelstall's mother.
Yes. Yep. So Howard Street was your family home?
Yeah.
Until you moved out?
No.
From the time I was born until I moved out, yeah.
I thought you lived at the mental hospital for a while.
Oh, that was in between.
They did the mental
Was a
hospital.
patient?
No, yes.
Should have been.
Well, should have been. For 5 or 6 years.
Because Nan died when I was...
Forget about the mental line. That was only an interim thing.
Okay.
You know,
So Howard Street was the home for a long, long time?
Yeah, it was always there.
Yeah.
It was always there.
Apart from the mental hospital, there were no other homes?
No.
Okay. So you and Dad lived there, and Mary lived there obviously for a long time?
Yeah, it was always there, yeah. Tom and I, we lived up there for... How many years we were up to the mental home?
Well, your
5 or
father
6.
retired in 1953-54, didn't he?
Yeah.
5
or 6 years.
Well, just now take it back a little bit. During the Second War, your father was working up at Beechworth, because there was a big mental hospital up there, and he was sent as part of the war thing up to there. You would have been living in Howard Street there.
Yeah.
So when he came back, he would have come back, am I right, as farm manager?
Yeah.
And the house went with it. So probably about 46, from about 1946 till about 1953, 54, they lived in the mental hospital.
Yeah.
But you would have been teenager growing into young womanhood, wouldn't you, by that stage?
I was working then. I was 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So that part of it was there.
That was an interim.
Okay.
Don't worry about that part of it.
If I can ask you about your father
Oh God, yeah.
and his parents were. Do you remember his parents? Were they alive?
No!
They died before you were born.
Mum did. Mum remembered the old lady. She had a lot of time for the old lady.
Was he a
Who's
Thomas?
the old lady? Tell me who the old lady is.
Joanna
Joanna
Scannell.
Scannell and Thomas
Yeah.
William.
No.
No. Oh, yes,
Thomas.
she remembers Thomas William. Mum does remember Thomas William.
I need to
But
get this
you also
straight. There was
have
Thomas
that.
William, then Buck was Thomas William, and then Thomas David.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But there again, you
Alright.
see, Mum remembered them because they lived in the same area.
That's
you know.
right. They were all at around Bald Hills, Hollowback.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you about Thomas William.
Your grandfather or your
My
father?
grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah, him and Joanna. Well, you see, he was married twice.
Yes.
I've told you that, yeah.
It's a nasty
I've seen it
habit.
somewhere.
Yeah, it's a nasty habit with those ladies. And his first wife is the mother of these two, Alice and Lisa.
No, you told me she was Alice and she was
Alice.
Molly.
No, that's Alice and Lisa, the two older ones.
Alice and Alicia. Okay.
Aloysius.
A girl called Aloysius. It's not easy to remember.
No, not even around.
So what was Thomas William the First's? His first wife? What's her name?
Well, her name was Mary Miller. But there again, was it M-E-L-L-O-R?
Don't know. I don't know
was
that I've
it
ever heard that.
I-double-L-E-R?
You were saying you thought this was
You
an accent
see,
thing.
there was an accent thing. I reckon
Miller.
her name was Mary. It was a coincidence, but I reckon her first name may have been Mary Miller. But who she was or anything else, nobody knows. And that's really got nothing to do with us. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Julian wants to know about it.
Yeah, but there again, I mean, if
There's no bloodline through.
I mean,
There's
to me,
no
these
bloodline
are just
through.
names in a story. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
they're all long dead
Now,
before I was born.
now, those two, Leisha and Alice. Now, Alice is, oh God, if you go through the relationships, it's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yes.
Those O'Donnells
Yes.
and the Laffeys. Oh, you see, there was not only were the brother and sisters married to O'Donnells and Laffeys married, but there was a niece married a brother, and look, it's
very
terribly
complicated.
involved, very involved.
It's not incest, but it's damn
No, it's
close.
not incest. It's not incest. It's incest. Shit, incensed.
Do you want some
Wrong
more?
again.
No, I haven't got this. But it's the whole lot, you know, being, no, it's too involved.
Okay.
You go mad. And we get down to another generation with Ed and Todd, don't we?
Yes. Cousins into cousins. It's very-
It's terrible.
Anyway.
Anyhow,
But talk about your father.
my father, what about him?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, his first marriage. No.
What would you like to know, Julian?
Your father. So I'm trying not to get mixed up here with all the people. Well, I guess we've talked about your father's first marriage, and then she died in childbirth.
Yeah,
The girls went away.
yeah.
So who did we say was still? Which girl was still in Ballarat?
Lena.
Lena was in Ballarat. The other girls were in Glen Iris.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Lena, when she turned 16 or 15 or 16, I forget. Then she got away, thank God, and she passed a public service exam, and she went to work at the Ballarat Exchange.
Yeah. Which was a quite prestigious job in those days.
Which I had.
All the best of
I
them.
had, and then I mightn't be intellectual with family, but I did pass me that exam. so Lena then went to work up in Castlemaine. She shifted up, and it was
That's
the
what
best
she
thing
did,
that happened to her.
She was
went up
just
to
a
Castlemaine
teenager.
as a teenager, and she went up there to work. And then she went to Melbourne, and she went to work with the Elizabeth Street Post Office Exchange, and that's when she sort of went to live with her own two siblings, which was good for her too.
Sorry, they all lived together.
Yeah, they all lived together with Molly O'Donnell, Molly and Poss, you know.
Right.
Tom Poss.
Tom Poss, yes, but there again, there's another story with Tom Poss, isn't there?
Don't start that one again. I've heard you on that one. You need Carmel Henry's story.
So everybody's got,
Right.
you know.
Stop it, Alice.
Yes, I know.
No, but there's skeletons in the family.
Yes, there are, yes, and there's one there, so they shouldn't hold their heads up either. But anyhow, so...
I assume we're not talking about terribly nice things.
we wouldn't know because we have no clue. We don't know.
Go on, spit it out. Yeah, they're going to anyway.
Come on, spit it out.
Well, now, everybody used to say, oh, you know, about Tom O'Donnell, that was Auntie Molly's husband, you know, Tom Poss. But Mum said to me once, she said, Uncle Arch, who was Mum's uncle, who lived at Barrenby.
Her mother's brother.
No, it was Dave's brother. Uncle
Oh, okay,
Arch.
sorry.
Another Arch.
Sorry.
Yeah, not that Arch, the other Arch, old Uncle Arch. Him and his wife, it was a lovely man, old Uncle Arch. They never had any family, him and his wife, and they lived at Barrenbeat. And he used to come in regularly, he'd come into Ballarat and he'd always come in to Mum and have, you know, a cup of tea or afternoon tea or lunch or something, you know. And anyhow, something came up about the O'Donnells, you know, there was a great one with the O'Donnells. He used to ride a bike from Barrenbeat to Ballarat and ride the bike back out again. And he used to always call on the O'Donnells. They had their dairy farm and they were great friends of Uncle Arch. And so, anyhow, this day he said to Mum, something came up about Tom O'Donnell, married to Dad's sister, you see. And he said, oh, of course, he said, he's not one of them. He's sort of only a half-brother. And Mum looked amazed, and when he saw that Mum had this funny look on her face, he shut up and he said, oh well, you know, he said, he sort of fluffed it off, you know, he never said any more.
This is a story your mother's recalled to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we never thought any more about it until years after, when Tom O'Donnell died, that was Auntie Molly's husband, died. Somebody said it was amazing that they found on the death certificate that he had been born in Adelaide.
Right.
Now, why was he born in Adelaide when the rest of them were all born in Ballarat?
Ah.
And Uncle Arch had said this statement, and old Uncle Arch said this, and he wasn't a gossipy woman, a gossipy old man. You know what I mean? He was straight down the line.
I was hoping something more solid than that, to be honest.
Therefore, big question marks.
We live in such sheltered lives, that's a big thing.
Yeah, which it was, yeah. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you're
But then that's a trial going off the other way.
It is, yeah.
That's right. We can't cover it all.
No.
Your father's parents died before you were born?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So Buck fathered you two quite late,
Yeah.
as Tom did me. What about Thomas Laffey the first? Was he the same? I wonder?
We don't know. He had two lots, didn't he? So, which Thomas Laffey the first?
Tom, who married Joanna Scannell.
Yeah.
Oh, we already had a first family, yeah. Here's
Yeah.
Alicia and Alice, yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about quite large
Who
gaps.
married-
We're talking about
who
40-year
married-
generation
who
gaps here.
Yeah, old Tom married
Yeah.
Mary Miller. And when you look at that, I reckon he must have been years older than her.
Probably.
I don't know.
Your father.
Because when they had the big beards and
It's hard to
everything.
know. And they all looked old by about 40 anyway.
Yeah. And yet I've got photographs of Molly and Con and Dad a few years later, you know, when they were in it. And they're very handsome.
Yeah.
Dark.
Yeah.
More like the mother, I'd say.
Yeah. So, talk a bit about your father. What do you remember of him? What was he like as a partner? Wild laughter. Don't give her any more wine. Do you want some more wine, seriously?
Only if you got one open. A funny man. You got to laugh. He really was a funny man. He had the greatest sense of humour.
No, I don't mind opening another one, though, if you want it open.
No, don't open it.
Crack it open, huh?
He was a
Oh,
funny.
okay.
He really was a funny man. He had the funny sense of humour. But then so did Mum.
Well, Mum says, and you may disagree,
Laugh a bit.
don't look at me like that. I can't see your face in the dark. You could be scowling at me. That your personality is more like Buck's, and that my dad's was more like Mary's.
You could be right there, yeah. You could be right there, yeah.
Not to say you're entirely alike, but there are... And that's one of the reasons why you found your father annoying at times.
I found me for what?
Your father could annoy you because
Oh, absolutely. Oh, well,
of similarity.
You were yang and yang.
I'll tell you a little story.
Okay.
I was... who was I pregnant with? One of them, Greg. And it was the time when Christopher threw threw the money in the fire, didn't he?
No, I haven't heard this, no.
Oh, well, God, I'm a kid. Les came home in those days, you know, you had your weekly wage.
In cash.
In
Ah,
cash,
right,
in the envelope. Les came home. Thursday at lunchtime, put the envelope in I put it in the drawer
Or a
in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I intended, you know, I don't know, I suppose I'd been washing one day and I hadn't changed the bed, and I was up changing the bed, and Christopher came up, he was only a little fellow, and he said, dirt, I've burnt all the dirty pieces of paper, Mum.
Oh,
And he up and he'd thrown the bloody money into the fire.
oh, what a week's wages. Oh.
Now, fortnight.
Fortnight.
In those days, it was about £37.
It's quite a lot of money.
Which in those days, you know, considering it was a lot of money. So, anyhow, I rang Les and he came home, and he said, come on, I'll take you over to your mother's. So I went over there, it was just on lunchtime, and because Mum was all upset, and Dad's sitting at the end of the table eating his dinner, and he says, what do you want to be putting all that money in the drawer for? Blah, 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 you know.
A lecture.
A lecture, which I didn't want. Pregnant with another child. And I pick up my dinner, and I was just about to have it on his head. I was so close to putting that bloody dinner on the top of his head. It wasn't funny. And he could see that I'd picked it up. And with that, he rose from the table and he went out the back and he came in with £5. And he said, here, that might help you out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you don't hit your father over the head with a plate of food, do you?
No.
It was so close, it wasn't funny.
He was sort of like the Sybil Pauli, stating the bleeding obvious.
Yeah, yeah. With your husband.
Well, he did with everybody. He did with everybody. And at times it could be very funny.
With that bloody flat battery that Tom used to have in that little car.
But do you remember the day... Do you remember the story? Your mother used to treat him and manage him very well. That he used to sit at the end of the kitchen table and he'd read the paper and the fire brigade, and then she would serve his meal out, and he's reading the paper, and he picked up the teapot, everything's laid out for him. I mean, he's like the Duke of God knows what. He pours a cup of tea and puts it down, and he misses the table. And he used to swear. He's very pithy the way he'd swear. And your grandmother, your mother, got up and walked out. You didn't laugh in front of him. It wasn't funny. It was funny, but he wouldn't see it as funny. And she had to go out into the backyard and laugh. It was like another time. And I saw this stuff in front of the fire. They had a big open fire. And everybody sat on the sides, but your grandfather sat right in front of the fire. It was thin. It was cold. And I used to go in there on a Saturday afternoon after the TAB, and Nan had always had this wonderful afternoon tea because I would have worked through from about 10 o'clock. And then she came in carrying the tray one day, and her toe caught on the rug. Straight across over your grandfather's head and exploded the whole afternoon tea on the hearth in front of him. And he said, Jesus bloody Christ. Do you remember Chris, the kids staying there, and he had to set the clock. The clock, you know that clock in the kitchen on the mantelpiece? That came from your...
Oh, the black clock.
No, in the mantelpiece,
sorry,
that one that looks like that.
Yes.
Well, they came from the Howard Street. And he had to set the time exactly to the 7 o'clock news.
Right.
And if the kids spoke or did anything, it was, oh, wow, now Mary can't get the bloody time.
All silence for the three kids, yeah?
Yeah, he had the silence. And he didn't get the clock right. It was gone for 24 hours. And he was like that, wasn't he? But terribly generous. Grew a massive amount of food down the back. We had food, we never bought food in terms of vegetables.
No, it was crap at the vegetables.
Eggs.
Yeah, but I will never forget. Oh, gee, there was a trauma in the life, I tell you. This is coming back, this going on further, of course. But Dad used to work the gardens. They were big blocks,
Well,
and there were these
straight back to the railway.
Yeah, I
and
remember.
there was this old maid that lived down about 3 doors down, and she had a big block at the back. And Dad used to work her vegetable garden, used to work the block at the back, keep her in vegetables, but keep the whole place tidy and clean because he grew onion plants and God knows what.
Yeah.
And anyhow, this time she said she was going away on a holiday, and there were possums getting into the house. So Dad said, "Well, leave it to me. I'll fix up the possums. I'll give me the key, and I'll put the wire up in the chimney to stop the possums coming in." It kept her in vegetables for years, So that's all right. She comes home about 3 weeks after, and she comes up, stands at the back door, and she says, Mum went to the back door, and she said, "I want to see Tom." And Dad goes out, and she said, "You've taken my money. I left 300 or 200 pound or whatever it was." And she said, "You've taken my money." Wow. This went on for 6 weeks. You've got no idea what it was like. It was the worst period of our life. We were living in Alfredton at the time. I used to come over. Dad would be in tears. He was so distraught about the whole thing. She had been round all the neighbourhood telling them that Tom Laffey pinched her money. This money that she had, and it was gone out of the house. So about, Dad went to the police. And they laughed. They said, "It's the first time anybody has come to the police." complained to them that he hadn't even been accused, She hadn't accused. So anyhow, with that, it's about, I suppose about 3 or 4. It went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And she came this day and she knocked on the door and she said, my sister Mary that lives out at Darrell or wherever Mary lived, I forget now, that she said, you've left this money with me. What do you want to do with it?
Well, she'd forgotten what she'd done with it.
It's a terrible thing to have had happen.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
Well,
And
you said
there were
37
neighbours.
pounds was a fortnight's wage.
That's
so
right.
There were
£100.
neighbours that didn't
Never
even come near.
believed it.
They didn't even come near. So one of these neighbours came near, and Mum, very stonily, she said, we knew Tom didn't do it, take her money, and she said, well, why didn't you come before? She said, don't bother to come back again. So, and she might, so anyhow, the old dear came up, this Mary Hackett, her name was, and she came up, and she was in tears. She said, I wouldn't have done that to my best friend, And Mary's mum said, she said, well, you did, Mary. And she said, I want you to go. She said, I want you to go to the police. I want you to go up to the monastery. She even went to the monastery and told the priest up there that Tom Laffey had taken her money.
Oh, right.
And she said, I want you to go up to the monastery and tell them.
Did she?
Yeah. And she said, I want you to tell all the neighbours that Tom Laffey didn't take your money, that you found it. And she said, and Tom Laffey will not work your garden anymore. And that was it.
What's sad, isn't it?
Was that? It was the worst time of Dad's life, I think.
Yeah. It was kind of it's hard to see it now,
But
but
let's suppose that Dad was an honest man,
oh yeah, irascible, but honest.
Yeah, irascible.
Although I've always said he was always very nice to me. He was always very kind. I don't think that's funny, Alice. Clearly she used something I don't know.
Tell me, Alice. Around at Howlett Street,
Yeah.
Tom Laffey brings this young woman home for the first time.
Yes.
Maybe he brought him to me first.
I only met the Laffey parents the night before our engagement was in the paper.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I knew Alice before.
What was he afraid of?
I don't, or ashamed of, I don't know.
Well, I never forget it. Tom rang me and he said, look, he said, I've been going with a girl.
Shut up, both of you. I'm going.
This is on the Sunday afternoon. I've been going with a girl. Do you mind if I bring her around after tea tonight? I said, what a little bit for tea if you like. I'm thinking to myself, good God, Sunday night's tea, God.
But you'd known that I was around anyway. You'd heard about it, hadn't you?
Yes.
And everybody in Ballarat knew either one of us, but we didn't know each other. I knew, just didn't know Alice.
So anyhow,
I only had my reputation.
I said, oh, yes, Tom, of course you can be around. Yes, lucky, yeah. But, I thought, oh, a bit supper, or I made sandwiches and one thing and another. And I said, I had only the 3 then, because I didn't have the 4th. And I manly got them all bathed.
Yeah, they were too. I can still remember.
All into their pyjamas and dressing gowns and looking all nice and clean and everything. And I said to Les, for God's sake, because it can't put on something decent.
You'd think it was
Don't
the
be
Queen.
sitting around in those old clothes, And I just sort of tidied myself up and organised a little bit of supper. Tom comes with this very elegant person, didn't he? She was all in black with pearls. I thought, oh shit, what we got here, She felt the same way.
Exactly. Oh my God.
She said, Anybody that she knew, you see, said, "Oh, you going to Alice Robertson?
Yes,
She's
yes,
always,
yes.
she's always well
Yes,
dressed,
yes,
blah, blah,
yes.
blah."
As I said, I knew a lot of people who, but for some reason, Alice and I had never run across each other.
No,
Because
we're different age
there was a
groups
different
anyway.
age group. But even so, in Barrow it was a strange thing because I knew the other Laffeys, Mary and Joan and
Oh, yes, but they were
Paddy.
Ballaratese,
They were
you see,
Ballaratese.
Not well.
But yeah, there was another word.
Yeah,
But it
that
was quite
works.
odd. But we sort of clicked along pretty.
Oh, yes, well, so, and then,
Then of course you couldn't get over it fast
the mum
enough.
quick enough on the Monday morning to say, "Oh, you should see Tom's girlfriend." And Mum's all agog, you know.
And it wasn't until the Friday night, and I made an issue. I'd been going with Tom 12 months. So I met Tom in February and we got engaged in the following April 12 months.
Right.
And I had to say, look, I really need to meet your family.
I think he was a bit frightened of his father.
Yeah. But I don't care what he said behind my back, but to me he was always a kindly... I mean, he was himself, but he was always pleasant enough to me.
Yeah, well, Tom,
Yeah, your father.
he would be,
Yeah.
yes.
I've heard of the Buck
And
that
Mum would.
if he didn't have anything to read at the table, he'd read the label of the sauce bottle.
I don't know.
Is that correct?
No, that is the Miller men.
Oh, that was the Miller.
Millers.
Yeah,
Oh.
I
They
know
said
the
they'd read
Miller
there.
men,
Yeah.
But your
yeah.
father was like that.
My father.
Oh, yes.
I say I'd love to read more at the table, but it's frowned upon.
I know.
So,
Yes, it's called, actually talking to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but a meal and something to read is
Yeah,
perfect.
it's lovely. I know. Yes.
Yeah, our great-grandfather used to sit, and Mum used to say he'd sit there, he'd be out in the garden, he was retired then, he'd be out in the garden, a great gardener.
They're all great
We're all
gardeners.
great gardeners.
That's deep in
Grow
us, yeah.
vegetables by the mile.
Yeah.
Come in and he would sit at the table right on the dot of 12 noon. And righto, the meal wouldn't be ready because they had the wood stove and
Yes.
everything, you know. And he'd spin, I could see him now. I was a kid, I could see him there and spin the knife and spin the...
Waiting for his meal.
Until his meal arrived.
And see, they would never, the men in those days wouldn't prepare any food.
No, no.
They'd never clean up. I mean,
No.
it just wasn't done.
No.
Yeah. Do you remember smoking and your mother coming into the kitchen and you shoving the cigarette into my hand? I remember. Do you remember
Don't talk
having,
about smoking.
do you remember
Tell me
having an
a story about
ashtray
smoking.
on a ledge up in your chimney where you used to, there was something somewhere in the chimney in that kitchen at Prince Street, and your
Yeah.
mother came out, you just whip it up straight up there. Because it didn't fool anybody for a minute, but we thought it did.
No, it didn't fool her either.
No.
Don't worry about that.
She was a lovely woman.
I
and I
remember.
think I did see a lot of Tom, in his mother in Tom,
Yeah.
and that's why one of the reasons why I loved her both so much. I think because
Yeah, she was...
she was a very amiable woman.
Let's face it, Mum, when looks were given out, Mum was well behind the door.
Mm.
She was raw-boned.
She was a Scotswoman,
Yeah.
farm woman.
I've got her hands and her feet, but that doesn't worry me. A very raw-boned woman, nothing as far as looks good,
No,
but a fantastic character.
lovely, a very funny woman.
Sense of humour, which I think I would trade a sense of humour and a character for looks any day.
Yeah. Now we're not going to mention names on this because this has been taped.
Yeah.
But there were. Your mother had. No, I'm wrong. Auntie Lou's sister, Uncle Arch, the baby who was given away.
Yeah.
Alice's uncle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alice's great uncle. Alice's uncle.
My uncle,
Arch,
yeah,
yeah.
my uncle Arch, yeah.
His
Lovely man.
wife Lou had a sister who had two girls, twins,
Mm-hmm.
two of the plainest girls you ever saw.
The pretty girl.
And your grandmother named them the pretty girls. And I see them them now, and I can remember the Taxi Girls.
It was an obviously cruel name.
It was a
wasn't
cruel name, but so funny.
What's a taxi driver?
And she would come out with these things and would just reduce you. And she took about the day when they came out, the two little girls, they would have probably been about Zach's age, singing Happy Birthday Ma, didn't they?
Yeah, their grandmother was her birthday, and Mum and Auntie Nell were sitting in this lounge room, and these two ugly twins came.
Poorly.
Birthday cake between them. They were the Sarah twins.
Oh, don't know.
Oh, I couldn't care less. They were the Sarah twins. and they were holding the cake between them, singing Happy Birthday to Ma. And Mum said, aren't they pretty? And Auntie Nell went into hysterics, and Mum kept the straight face.
And
that
she
was
could.
Mum.
Yeah.
Mum would keep the straight face.
Yeah, she could. She would say this. And Buck had a very good relationship. They understood very well each other.
They did.
Do you remember the time that woman, and I can't think of her name, she came up from Melbourne and she'd seen the statue of David in my window?
Yeah.
You must remember this story, you've told me it. And she went into, Tom had been oosted out of his room, which joined onto the kitchen in Howard Street.
Yeah.
And she'd been given Tom's room, and she went in to change, and she said, "Hey, Mary!" She's shouting, your grandfather's still sitting in his usual spot by the stove.
I know who it was, yeah.
Can you go on with that story?
Arlie Donovan, it'd have to be.
It
It
was.
was Arlie Lanigan, yeah. No, I don't know.
She shouted out, "Hey, Mary! You never guess what I saw of what they've got in Maya's window. They've got a statue of David with a penis in front." And your grandfather never moved his head. He said, "Where else was the bloody thing?" And it was that sort of dry exchange.
Well,
It would go on between them both, wouldn't it?
Well, the same woman, she was Arlie Lanigan, and sort of connected more to Dad's first wife.
That's
family,
right, the
she
Lanigans.
was, yeah. But
From,
Mum was always pretty friendly with her, you know, and she used to come up from Melbourne. And all her nephews were, they were Lanigans, yeah, they were all doctors.
Lanigans, yeah.
Yeah, they were doctors and surgeons and God
there's
knows
still
what in
Lanigans
Melbourne.
out at Coble's Creek, and they're connected.
Right.
Veronica's sister was a Mrs. Lanigan, wasn't she?
Yeah, something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
But anyhow, Dad, at this time, she was epileptic. Of course, they didn't have the anything to sort of keep epilepsy under control in those days. So Arlie was a big woman, and she used to dress beautifully, always in black. But she used to come up and stay, you see. And her and Mum were very friendly. Mum thought the world of Arlie, but anyhow, Arlie had a fit in the toilet. And it was the outside toilet, wasn't it, you know? And the door only opened inwards, it didn't open. She had to, and it was the days of the cans, wasn't it?
Not a good look.
Dad, it was terrible. I'll never forget it. And Dad said, Arlie, you all right, Arlie? No answer, you know. Eventually he had to take the door off. And all Mum said, she was a big woman, and she said all he could see was this great big heap of flesh with the drawers down.
She was all right.
She was all right, yes. But at the time it was rather tragic, you know.
Was Buck a strict man? A strict father? No?
A lot of sound and noise, but nothing in there.
What?
He would roar and carry on a bit.
I think he hit me twice.
That's all right, Mum hit me once. It's my only one behind.
No, I remember I came home. It was when I first started school, and I went to the state school over the road.
Tom went there for a day or two.
Which school was this?
Windery, still there. Howard Street.
The primary school.
Yeah,
Right.
Miss Evans.
Yeah.
She was lovely, Miss Evans. And I came home and I said, the teacher fooled me. Now there's a what's the word? Isn't it?
Teacher.
Fooled me.
Oh! I
There's a
remember
word
that.
from the
Yes,
past.
by Jove, you're right, yes.
Teacher fooled me.
Yeah. Or,
And
yes.
Dad gave me a crack all the way up the drive and sent me back up again. And that was the first time I ever had him. Only from him. And the next time was April Fool's Day. And Lucy happened to be up. And her and Mum were sitting on the front veranda. And Dad was bending over in the garden. He was weeding the garden in the front, and I put a donkey's tail or whatever it was I put on me. And not having any flesh, it went through to the bloody bone. And he up and gave me a crack across the ear for that. And Mum and Lucy, I nearly fell off their chairs laughing. I remember that. It's so funny.
Was he thin like
Oh,
my
thin.
dad was?
Oh, thinner.
Thinner.
He was
Yeah.
sort of like a vulture. You know,
He had nothing. Nothing.
he just sort of walked.
You know how your father walked when it was cold? Your father would be like that.
Yeah.
Well, Buck was like it the whole time. Wasn't it?
Yeah. Had nothing.
Nothing.
No
No fat.
lovely.
And yet ate a lot of food.
He drank most nights, didn't he, over at the
Oh, he only had 2 pots. 2 pots. That kept
every
him
night.
young.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to
Over
ask,
the
this
Bluebell.
isn't really a family thing, I wanted to ask what Howard Street was like back then. Obviously the Bluebell would have been there,
Yeah.
and Grandma would have been there.
In fact, the
And the private
photos on
schools.
the wall at the Bluebell with your grandfather in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I can
Yeah.
look at that. But the rest of Howard Street, I imagine, would be unrecognisable
Oh,
today.
yeah. Apart from the school.
The school, the monastery obviously was there with its grounds. And
Oh, yeah, but that's
the nastiness that's there today. And then what was mostly residential, like the south side?
Yeah, it was an empty block.
Yeah.
Big empty block from about, I suppose, about 5 houses up from our place.
Right.
Then there was an empty block.
Yep.
And there was
Tom's-
a few.
What about all the way down to Forest Street? What was down there?
Oh, that was all houses, yeah.
Tom spoke about, and I think you had too, that if a car went past, you knew whose car it was.
Yeah.
Going up, there was so few.
Right. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a main
Oh no,
street in
no,
the sense of
no way.
No.
Yeah. But Tom, and you would remember this too, Alice. During the war, he can remember standing down the back of the block and seeing the prisoners of war being trained up to the Italian prisoners of war being trained up
to
Howard
the-
Street.
No, he's got that wrong. Now, they weren't Italian business boys. You see, that's he's 4 years younger than me.
I don't. Go on.
And
Yeah.
he's got that wrong. No, they were American soldiers being villagers.
Well, they may have been both, Alice, because you're quite right. The sick.
I never ever remember any Italian prisoners.
Well, they would have been, Alice, because when we had Mount Lonnock, we found out while we were there that there were prisoners of war camp for Italians back in, the Mount Cole range.
Yeah.
And Tom, it was at that stage, he said that makes sense of what he saw with the Italians going by Wavy. But you're quite right, they would have been Americans too, because Lakeside, what they call the new part of Lakeside, was actually built to house sick American soldiers.
Yeah, there was a hospital.
A surgery.
American
How did we end up
hospital.
with Italian prisoners of war in Australia?
Oh, because, well, when North Africa was taken and vast, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of prisoners, they were just dissipated around. And yes, yeah. It's like, why did the Americans finish on Ballarat? There were good reasons why they
Well,
did
that was before Guadalcanal. You see, they were sent off to those. It was before the Japanese really got down to Guadalcanal, and
It was following Pearl Harbor.
yeah, after Pearl Harbor, the Americans were all brought in, and they were billeted, and they were all top class
they were
Americans.
actually-
I tell you, there was no
actually-
rubbish amongst them.
They thought the Japanese would be able to bomb down.
Yeah.
And they couldn't, of course.
No,
We now know
no.
they didn't have the capacity. But what happened was they had to get them away from ports
Yeah.
because Pearl Harbor had just decimated so much.
Yeah.
So they just took them inland. So you took them, there was sort of a hole back
Yeah,
that came
there was a lot
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, we had a lot of
But
it.
they also had
Yeah.
a hospital, a military hospital.
Yeah,
At-
as well. Yeah.
As part of
AGH,
Right.
yeah, AGH.
Yes.
Yeah.
And part of the QE was built, it was a military hospital too.
Yeah,
So,
In Ascot's room.
yes.
Right.
yeah. But then you see there was a camp, Victoria Park.
Yeah.
It was a military hospital. It was all camp.
Yeah.
They were all tents.
And they used to,
Oh.
the whole
but
place
there
was
was an
under.
area
Yeah.
of people. See, Les was there at one stage.
Yeah.
He was in Victoria Park.
And what they used
As
to do with the
malaria
American,
patients, yeah.
with the American soldiers was they used to march them down Sturt Street along Main Road
Yeah, and
out to the butts to the rifle range. And when the rifle range was sold, our Tom went to a lot of trouble because they found some inscriptions there from what was obviously American soldiers, and they remained there and they were inscribed in concrete.
Yeah.
And we actually emailed, tried to pick up names and cities where these people had come from because it would be sort of like Smith from Smithfield, Wisconsin or something like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, I might still have some of that stuff at home, actually, trying to locate them and say there is evidence that this person was here, do you know them? So they used to march them in and out each day, so that was what they did with them. And that was when I was as a small child, smaller than Zachary,
Yeah.
held the American Army up
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Main Road. So that's why, because they marched up and down there.
Did you ever get any contacts back from anyone?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
A bit remote. We went through papers. It was local papers. Well, I'll have a look, love. It's probably on the in my my email file somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have a look for that. Yeah, but nothing came because Tom was quite right. He said once the Commonwealth sold the property, once it did, all that stuff would be just rubble.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he said it's history, of course, too.
Yeah. Your place in Howard Street, it backed onto the train tracks.
Yeah.
Was there a fence between you and the train tracks?
Oh, yes. There was an area about, the fence was there, and the railway line, the fence of the railway line was about out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So therefore,
There was a real
Mum
strict.
ran a cow, didn't she?
Ah.
You see, you rented it off the railway people, of the
Railways.
railways.
Yeah.
And so you could run a cow, she ran a Jersey cow along there. But
See, again, that block was very self-supporting. The front part was garden,
yeah,
but the
big
back was all
block.
vegetables, chooks,
Yeah.
and a
Yep.
cow. And this was the way people very often got through.
Yeah.
And you remember your mother, I think she kept a few of the neighbours' children during the hard years in
Oh,
milk
good
and eggs.
God, next door. We had, Mum used to separate the milk to get the cream and
Yeah.
make her butter, she made her own
She made all
butter.
those things. Yeah.
And the separated milk, which this day had been revved,
Yes. Yeah.
was put on the fence
Yeah.
for the next door neighbours.
Mm.
Plus an extra bucket of full cream milk
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
put on them because they never had anything. And then she found out that the bloke next door, by the name of Loader, was giving that, couldn't care less, was giving that milk to his bloody whippets. So that was the finish of that, wasn't it?
Your mother used to walk up to 6 o'clock mass, didn't she? At the
Monastery, yes.
on Sunday.
She'd get up at 5, and then when the daylight saving started, she forgot to put the clock back, and she was up there at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was 4 o'clock, and they wondered why the church was that.
But she was a very
Practical,
very
Catholic.
practical woman and pragmatic. She wasn't a complainer. She was warm-hearted, hospitable to a remarkable degree. And I remember. Do you remember when she was at the end of her life, when she was clearly failing, and she didn't want to know? We think she probably had cancer of some sort.
Yeah, which was in the neck.
Yes.
Thyroid.
But she didn't want to know, and she didn't want to do anything about it, and she didn't do anything about it. We all respected that. And she finally had a stroke, as your dad did, and she went out that way. But it was interesting that she had lived a good life, and she was happy to go. Yeah.
So that was in 1977, I think.
Yeah, 77, 79,
So how old was she?
she was 86.
She's 86.
86.
86. What did you say? 86, 87?
86, 87.
Okay.
Do you remember the night she fell getting into the house? She couldn't get her head. And in the kitchen, they had a little window, not much bigger than that
picture.
high up.
Right.
So she got a ladder around, and she opened it, and she lost her footing coming down, and she's hanging. She's how old is this? She's about 80 by this stage.
Yes.
And she's hanging by a foot.
She'd been to
Well, upside
with
down.
her friend 2 doors down, Mrs. Westfield.
Yeah.
And that lovely little brick home,
Yes,
you know.
yes,
Yes,
they
loved
went,
her and her Mrs. Westfield. They clicked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Came home, forgot the key and couldn't get in the house. Climbs up in and she's hanging. And I said, well, what happened? Oh, she said, I dropped down. And there was a bridge chair, you know.
Yeah, I remember. Your father always sat in it, yeah.
I fell into that, and she said, I think I must have knocked myself out. But she said, I came to, and she said, I remembered your father had left a little bit of brandy down in the cupboard. And she said, so I reached and I got the little bit of brandy out the cupboard. I had a swig of that, and I slept like a log all night.
But you know, that house at Howard Street had no hot water.
No.
And that used to worry us, didn't it?
Yeah.
The house we thought was falling down around us.
Yeah.
So how would you bathe?
Hey?
Bathe.
Chip heater.
Chip heater.
Chip heater.
What's that?
Well, it's like a cylinder.
She came up to me to everything.
Yeah, but it was like a cylinder.
Yeah.
And you set a fire going, and the water would be in that.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the water boiled, you put it into the bath and add cold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you do the same thing for washing. See, she didn't have a washing machine. She would never.
Yeah, she did.
Towards the end.
She had my wash.
When you went to the pub.
She wouldn't use it.
No. But they'd have a big copper, and that was a round copper set in a concrete square, under which was a firebox. And I can remember this very clearly with my mother too, at Steinhill Street. And they'd fill it with water and washing soda and washing soap.
Yeah.
And then they put the clothes in, and they'd have these big poles. Then they'd set the fire going.
Yeah.
And they would boil the clothes because it was a way of cleaning, which they didn't have a lot of detergent. And they used the poles to sort of push them around. Hard physical work.
A posset stick.
A posset stick. And then they were terribly dangerous. Really dangerous.
Boiling water.
Yeah. Then they used the sticks to hook the clothes into a big sink to rinse them. Then they would physically...
Just the scrubbing on the board.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
then you had to put them in another thing
that
had a blue bag.
Oh, you had to have a blue bag.
Which did what?
It could
Made the white clothes look a little bit brighter.
And then you had to make starch.
Yeah.
You had to make starch. All of this we don't do.
Yes.
And then they were hung out. And then you had... How did your mother iron clothes?
With a flat iron to start with, with an iron on the stove to start with.
A number of irons on the stove.
With
there was always more than one.
What was it?
Many irons in the fire.
Yeah, beeswax.
Yep.
Beeswax, and she'd rub the iron over the beeswax
To keep it smooth. And you had to have several irons because they cool very quickly.
Yeah, so you grab one iron and put it back over.
Hard work.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean,
absolutely.
And then they would do all their own gardening, all their own everything.
So,
It's not going to be full-time work.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, very
We've got
hard.
it made these days.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, fascinating.
It's
Fascinating.
funny, I remember the house at Howard Street. I remember
Yeah.
being there.
Yeah.
Don't remember Nan at all.
No.
Don't have a
Yeah.
memory
No,
of
too
it.
young.
I have a memory of being in the house and it being empty. Now I'm wondering if I
It
went
was.
there after she died.
Yes, you would
You
have,
would
because
have.
Carmel, it was empty for a period of time.
Yeah.
Then Carmel Hempel
Carol
moved in,
Hemsall lived in.
and she lived in there.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
And I see her, Eric's mother-in-law died.
I thought Veronica was dead. I got
Yes.
such a. How old would Veronica be? She
Oh,
would
I
be.
don't know.
She'd
Her
be
Very
right.
ex-mother-in-law.
No. She went with Robert Reed, for instance.
She did too.
Yeah, Robert Reed, his mother died. She went
Right.
with him, that's all. But, well,
I was on Shelley Wentworth, didn't I?
no, I don't know. We don't know. But anyhow, we're in that, big question mark. But anyhow,
You know they're sharing a back fence.
hey,
You know they share a back fence now.
did they?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah. Robertson's wife number. God.
3, I think it is.
Yeah,
Oh,
something.
yes, yes. But Veronica was an old bitch.
Oh,
Anyhow,
Carter.
yes.
There's a very funny story. Annie Reid is an old mate of mine.
God, she was a
Annie and
bitch
Frank.
woman.
You remember Frank?
Yeah, I
Frank was
yes.
about 5 foot
Yeah.
nothing.
But
And Veronica. But Frank used to take Annie, his daughter-in-law,
Yeah.
to the opera. And because he was Italian, he was really keen on it. And he used to take her around and introduce her. And she told me about the day she met Joan Sutherland. And Frank went out, and she said, he stood, and his head was under her bosom, under Joan's big bosom. And he just grasped her hand and said, Madame. You know, very bosom, this little wee man. And he reckoned it was the funniest thing she ever saw. Yeah,
Just
sorry.
imagine. Yeah.
And that was a diversion. What
No.
else do you want to know? We've rattled on here like a pair of old, I don't know what.
What else? Can you turn it off while I go to the loo?
Yeah.
We can do that. I'll grab a piece of wood.
I'm just saying about yeah, I'll have to get that was earlier days when when Lena and Miles were first married. Of course, they lived up in Kuitong, which is up right up the other side to Langata, up in the
Northeast of
northeast
Victoria.
So we went up on a holiday, Tom and I. I'm about, I suppose Tom's about 12. Oh, he would have been younger than that. He would have been 11 and I was about 14 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we get up there and it's an old farmhouse, in the middle of a paddock sort of business. And one part of the house I'll weatherboard and one part of the house is sort of the lounge room, the kitchen and 2 bedrooms and the wash house come bathroom type deal. And then you went through this breezeway where they had a kerosene fridge and there was another 2 bedrooms, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom was in one bedroom and I'm in the other. And there was an awful storm and the wind was blowing and the walls were going in and out and in and out. So I go over to Tom sound asleep, wasn't he? And I said, you've got to come and sleep with me. I'm not staying in this room on my own. Poor old Tom had to come and sleep with me in a double bed. So the next night I think Lena organised things that, we didn't take. You notice these days, wouldn't you? A couple of kids sleeping together.
Talk to Julian about what you remember of Tom as a kid growing up. What was he
That's
like?
what I was about to ask.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Well, was he quiet? I mean, to me, he's a quiet man.
Of course he was quiet, yeah. All I could ever remember of Tom was in his bedroom listening to the Goons.
Oh, that didn't change. Surely it was.
No change.
Roaring, laughing, yeah.
Well, he did that. He
Right through.
Right through.
Yeah.
The Goons are still on, every Friday morning at 5:30.
It's Friday or Saturday?
Fridays.
Friday morning at 5:30.
Yes,
He
and
loved the
I listen
Goons.
to it. And I never ever thought they were that funny, but I always think of Tom.
Yeah.
And he'd always sort of, when I'd turn on the radio, this is in the last few years, he'd push the hearing aid in and he'd listen, poor old thing, trying hard to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I remember being out in the car on
Goons.
Saturdays somewhere, going somewhere and
Yes,
be on the radio.
12:15,
Yep.
Yeah. Love the Goons. And what else? Well, I remember when we used to live up at the farm, when the time in
He was a wild boy drinking, though, wasn't he, Tom? Do you remember the accidents?
Oh, yes, but that was later on. He had his mates that he and his grandmother came out one New Year's morning on her way to Mass, and your father was sitting in the little car with his mate Atlas. And one was this way and one was and she said, "Get out of that car, Don't have the neighbours talking about us."
But there were those terrible accidents. And the realities are that Tom was driving and drinking. And he was,
But everyone did.
How he wasn't caught, I'll never know. Like there was a time that I think Molly and George were up, and we were living in Alfreton, and so Tom brought Molly and George and Mum and Dad over to us for tea on the Sunday night. And there was 5 of them in the car, besides the little car. You wouldn't remember the little car.
No, they were gone before my time.
Little tiny car. So on the way home, Tom drove them over and stayed there, and on the way home, I think a policeman followed them all the way in the police car, all the way down Gilly Street, all the way down Howard Street, and as they turned into 1321 Howard Street, the policeman pulled them up.
Yeah.
And Mum said, she said, I was having a fit, I really wasn't. And anyhow, that's right, the policeman said, came up to Tom on the driver's side and said, "You wouldn't mind telling me where so-and-so lived?"
You types of directions.
Oh, you only want directions.
What about the time Tom discharged a firearm in the backyard and got caught? And went to court.
Oh, come on.
Oh, no, that was... no, there was two deals there.
I know what the deals were. Don't tell me no, I know.
The first
Headlines.
I'll tell you.
I want to hear about my father's criminal record. This is new.
No, the first one.
We've often wondered about the missing years.
No, there was nothing. No trouble. The first one was I came home from work. This is when we lived up at the farm,
Yeah.
And I came home from work this day at about 3:30. Apparently I started early, And the dog was shot.
Go on. Come on, then. Get back here.
I came home. That was the dog. He was shot. You weren't shot, darling, were you? Anyhow, I came home from work this day at about 3 or something, and Mum had met me at the door with this white face, Mum never had a white face, but as white as could be. And she said, we've got a terrible fright today. I said, what? She said, Tom come home from school. He was in the cadets, cleaning the rifle. You know what Tom would be like. Everything had to be perfect. Cleaning the rifle up in his room, hadn't discharged the blasted thing. Cleaning the rifle, and she said, I heard this awful report. She said, I went cold. And she said he hadn't discharged the I don't know much about guns, but he hadn't discharged the thing, and it went off and the bullet went straight through the roof, straight through the two roofs, the roof, the ceiling, straight through the roof of the veranda. And she said, when I went up, she said, here he is sitting with a white face.
This is another story, though.
He's brought a gun home.
No, he had...
Where's that, sorry?
Well, from St Pat's Cadets.
He was boarding. You said in his room.
Yeah, but he had the St Pat's Cadets rifle. He had.
He didn't board. No.
He what?
He didn't board. So I thought you meant he was in his room, like in his...
Yeah, he was in his room. He was cleaning his rifle.
At home.
At home.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to ask yourself how come a school would let a child.
Well, I was going to say that.
Yeah,
But
but
like the good old days
that's
where
not
kids
the
are
story
wandering
I'm
around
talking
the
about.
They did in those days.
That's
apparently.
not the story I'm talking about. The story I'm talking about is when Tom
Yeah.
was minding a pistol.
Oh,
for W.
that's another-
James.
That's another.
Now,
come
let's
on.
have that one.
Now that's another story. Now Michael Walsh. No, not Michael Walsh. What was his name?
Dougie James.
No, it wasn't a Jones. It was
James. Doug James.
No, it was my friend Nell's cousin.
Anyway,
Michael was a
you're
redemptor.
really interested
Whoever
to
it
get
was.
to it.
Michael was a redemptor who left the church.
Oh, God.
Francis Walsh said to Tom, him and Tom were mates.
How old was-
they were
how old was
friends,
Tom?
you know. Oh,
16, 26?
No.
In his 20s.
They were well into
In his
their
20s.
Okay.
And Francis said to Tom, do you mind if I borrow your old Luger pistol?
What? Who said to
Who said to who?
Francis.
No, you have got this so boxed up. Tom was minding this for Doug James. And he took it out the bag and he discharged it. And somebody reported him and the police came.
I thought Francis Walsh was the one that...
And Tom had to go to court about it.
I know he had to go to court.
And was fined and made the headlines. He's very
And,
proud
he
of
was,
that.
and the headlines in the paper were, Luger pistol found in rubber boot. And the police came. Mum said, "Oh, we had the police here." They went down into the shed and they found the Luger pistol
Somebody
in the
got
rubber
it in.
boot.
You never knew who it was, though,
And
did
the
you?
blasted old thing, it wouldn't. Yeah, it might have fired, but it wouldn't have hit anybody.
Oh, famous
Oh,
last
yeah.
words, Alice.
It'll be fine. We won't hit
Yeah,
anybody.
we won't hit
No, but
anybody.
anyhow,
Was
we
he
was-
convicted? Was there a conviction?
Yes,
made?
he
Yes.
was. He was.
My father, the criminal. I never-
Yeah,
So Dad would never in a million years bring this up in conversation.
No,
No,
but he was.
No,
he
in
was
fact,
a-
when
If he knew he was proud of it, he still wouldn't bring it up.
No.
when I tried at one stage, I was squashed.
like him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
If he was here now, he'd be saying, "Oh, I've never heard." He'd be doing your father. He really would.
Yeah.
But he was a funny man because when he died, there were things that still haunted me from his past. They were always there.
Yeah.
Like Simon and Melanie had to take the rifle to the police station the night that Tom died.
Yeah.
What hit Tom's rifle?
Yep. And it was quite interesting because they got together and I don't know who said who to which one. But Tom died at 1 o'clock. We all went out for tea to laugh because it was you.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Simon or Melanie said to me, look, there's an issue. Because, see, again, Tom being Tom, he was a member of a rifle club, therefore he was
Yeah.
allowed to have a rifle without all the...
Yeah,
A lot of,
yeah.
They had to have registration, but it was supposed to be left in a locked cabinet at the rifle club, and it wasn't, because he wouldn't do that, would he? It was kept
Ah.
under our bed.
Oh, it wasn't properly secured.
Yeah.
No, it
Was
wasn't
that the
properly
issue?
secured. They said, you've got
So
to get rid of it.
what happened?
Well, that night, so Melanie, I don't know who, I wish she was here, I could ask her, but she knew, or she checked out, or she rang the police, and they said, bring it down. So, and when they got down to the station, they were told, they must have rung, because they said, don't bring it in, come in and get us. Because I suppose the police didn't want anybody marching in with a rifle.
No.
Which you can see their point.
Yeah.
So they went in and then the police came out and got it. Yeah.
Came round to Dawson Street.
No, they took it down to the police station from Dawson Street.
Oh.
And they took
Because
the,
you see,
because he was very slack on those things.
yeah,
And
because
he
you
was
see,
very naughty. Very naughty.
yeah, because you see, Mark, Chris has got shotguns and rifles,
But they're under lock.
and they were in a lock cabinet in my wardrobe of all places. They were locked up there. And then he said, "Look," he said, "Mum, if anybody comes to ask about it, tell them that they're there, and that you haven't got the key." But then he took them back to Geelong, and they're in a cell cabinet down in Geelong.
See, you've got to be very careful. No, and I had never liked it, and I had never wanted it.
Nah.
But he could be very stubborn at times, and that was
Yeah,
one.
well,
That
it's
was one.
pretty pedantic when all's said and done, you know.
No, they're not. Not
I
following.
think to a certain extent.
Who are pedantic?
Yeah. Eh?
Who are pedantic?
Well, the authorities, you know, over the gun business, I think, you know, there's a certain amount. They don't have to go so far, you know. I know that, you know, they need these things locked up, but if they're in hands that are, you know, that they know that well, you know.
You put yourself into a deeper hole there, Alice. As I said.
Stop digging.
And we're not arguing with you, Melanie, you're just digging.
I'm getting digger and digger. If that's a word.
What else do you remember about Tom? You must remember some things. His quiet presence, reading.
He was out of bloody quiet, and that's why I didn't remember him. Him and I getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going down in the summer and having a go at tennis. No, as far as brother and sister goes, you see, there was too much age difference between us. You know what I mean? He had
3 years.
4.
no 4. You see, I was on my way. And he was still a student. And a good student.
Because he wanted to be a chemist.
Yeah.
And then he had those 2 accidents.
Oh, well, I
Well, tell me about
I
2
forget
accidents.
the
Anyway.
bloody accidents. Oh, God.
What were there was the motorcycle accident around the lake.
Oh, yes. I'll never forget that, yeah.
What can you remember about
Oh,
Tom?
yeah, I remember going to the hospital with Mum and Dad, and Dad wouldn't go in. You see, there we are.
Did the police come up to your place?
He wouldn't go into. He sat out in the passage, and Mum and I went in because Mum was pretty strong over those sort of things. You know, we thought, oh God.
How did you find out?
Can't remember. I suppose I got a phone call.
Oh, you wouldn't have got a phone call, not at Howard Street.
Well,
The police
How
must
old was
have
Tom? How old was Tom when he had that first accident?
wasn't he about 21?
19, 20. Yeah, well, at that stage, we were living in Alfredon.
Were you married? Did you have a phone right from the word go?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So anyway, regardless, they wouldn't have got the call.
Oh,
in the,
look, it's so long ago, I can't remember really.
So
I remember going to the hospital with Mum and Dad.
on that night,
Yeah, on that night, and Dad wouldn't go in. You know, he sat out in the passage.
how did
he
you get
wouldn't
down
go in.
there?
Hey?
How did you get down there? Because you were
I'm blowed if I
you
know.
weren't driving
I
at
can't
that
remember
stage.
now. I wouldn't have been driving then. I must have got there some way. And I went in with Mum, and he seemed to be all he had, you know, everything he had. I can't remember.
But he was in a cast for a long time, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
So this was him on a motorcycle
Yep.
going
Yeah.
around the lake.
Yes.
Failed to negotiate
He was
the
on
end
his
of it.
way back from school.
No, he wasn't.
Well, Dad, that was the story. Was that the second time?
The one that I understood that did the most damage was he was going home from the army on a Monday night and he was drunk, probably, on a motorbike. He failed to take the turn at the Lakeview Hotel
Yeah.
And he landed on the rocks. You know, they used to have those volcanic rocks along the side.
How old was he then?
About, probably about 18, 19. It would have probably been just after national service. He did national service.
And then what about the second time?
No, the second time... No,
He was coming back from Stawell the second time.
yeah.
He'd been up there to relieve...
Yeah. But see, he used to ride a motorbike up and down there with no licence.
Oh, no, yeah.
When was this? I wasn't aware there were two accidents. If he's had one,
Yeah, they had
if
two
he's had one, it was a very bad one.
Yeah.
Stuffed his leg. He was in plaster
Yeah,
for a long time.
the second thing that happened to him was when he fell and broke that leg again.
Yeah.
So how many?
No, the second time he broke the leg, he just got out. I was there.
He was
I
on
was
the crutches.
pregnant, very much pregnant. And he got out of bed and his leg went from under him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the
And
time.
that's why he's had that.
That was the
That's
time
right,
I
leg.
passed out, and your grandfather was pouring brandy down my neck. And Mum saying,
Don't worry about it.
very much pregnant, and your grandmother saying, "You'll drown at top, you'll drown."
So he was months and months on crutches.
Yeah, we're waiting for the ambulance to come, and I passed out because I couldn't stand to see him with a broken leg again, you know.
He was months in hospital.
Yeah.
The first time. And then he re-broke again later.
He broke it
Right.
again later.
Okay. Oh,
But he
no.
broke 2 vertebrae in his back
Oh,
that first time.
high or low?
I don't know exactly where, but there were 2 cracked vertebrae,
Okay.
and he had
The leg was the
the
main
legs,
thing.
yeah, and he'd bitten his
Yeah.
tongue through. He was a mess.
It just cracked under him.
Well, then his back wasn't too bad then, was it really?
He'd go through phases that I think that you all get difficult backs, and I think it comes with being long
it's
people.
Yeah.
a genetic thing.
A length thing, yeah, rather than as a result of the accident.
Yeah.
But see, he was working in those days. They worked as apprentice chemists, pharmacists.
Yeah.
But the reality is, your grandparents wouldn't have been able to afford for him
No,
to
they
go to
couldn't.
Melbourne.
And he knew that. He knew they couldn't afford to.
But it was a shame because he was very good.
Although, let's face it, Monaghan,
Old Jim.
old Jim, he offered to pay.
I think something could have been there. But the accident came at just that time.
Yeah.
And when I met Tom, he was toying with the idea, and that's all he would have done because he wouldn't have done it. He wasn't going to have it, of going to the Antarctic for a year. Didn't know that, did
But
you?
he had to be a scientist, wouldn't he?
No, there's lots of jobs people would do. He's going to go do it.
Really?
No. But unfortunately, I slipped him off his feet.
I wouldn't have.
Oh, well, I'm sure he didn't
No,
mind.
isn't that right,
Sure he didn't mind.
Yes.
So because you two had planned to go there anyway, fly over.
I had
Oh,
hoped to do
yeah,
that
was that he had?
the birthday.
Yeah.
Birthday, wasn't it?
No, I didn't know that.
No, he was going to
I
go.
assumed it was only scientists that did that.
Oh no, there's a lot of other things that people go down to support scientists. Yeah. What else do you need to know? We haven't talked about this.
Come on.
Oh, there's not really a question what I need to know. There's so many gaps I don't...
This is opening so many things.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, we've talked about your mother's family.
Yeah.
Your mother's family.
A little bit about the sisters.
There's a white cat there.
There is a
about
white
it's the ghostly white cat that was here.
The white cat way. Oh, a white cat with it.
And we've talked about Buck and what Buck was like and his parents. What you know of his parents.
Yeah, oh, I reckon Joanna had a bad temper, but that's only from one side of the family.
This is Joanna here, seated.
Joanna.
Scannell.
Yes, Joanna Scannell.
But you wouldn't blame Joanna because I really do think that she came out. I told you that she came out when she was 16. I told you that.
She came out what?
As an immigrant when she was 16.
From Ireland.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the whole family, they paid their own way. They weren't, they didn't come out. assisted immigrants. They came
Or as
out on their
convicts.
own.
The convicts came out under the Laffeys.
No, they were scouts here.
Yeah, I know.
The
But I think
Scots.
if there was any convict, it was under Laffey. Because do you remember
Yeah.
when the 200 anniversary?
Yeah.
And we went down and had a look at the.
Yeah.
And there was a Bartholomew Laffey. There was a number of them, and we were up
Yeah.
at sheep stealing. But when you read a bit of stuff, a lot of those young ones broke the law deliberately to be transported.
Transported,
Yeah.
yeah.
That it was their only chance.
See,
to
I
get
don't
this
know
right.
about Thomas. I don't know about Thomas's father.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have a clue.
Well, if he was
Tom
Bartholomew,
went into that, did he?
yeah, he did. You've
Was
got
it
some
Bartholomew?
anything. If you got that stuff I gave you,
I've got a manila folder
Yeah,
with
what's
some
in there?
material in it. Yeah.
But I'll tell you something that occurred probably in about 2000 that came home to Tom and to me was a bit of a surprise. When Bonnie died with that baby, you think, oh, yeah, Bonnie and the baby died. It's your half brother, and Tom's half brother.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because we'd never thought of it in those terms, as
No,
being
I
Bonnie's
haven't,
baby.
no, never,
Yeah.
no.
And when Tom found the grave where she is, and there's a really strange story associated with who's buried in what graves up there. Do you remember?
I haven't never found that grave at Creswick.
No, well, I thought they were actually up here. But
No,
anyway,
Creswick.
well, the baby is, he suddenly realises it isn't Bonnie's baby, it's Tom's half-brother.
Yeah.
Your half-brother.
Yeah.
Were the three girls to you sisters or half sisters?
As far as I was concerned, they were sisters.
Yeah.
But they were half sisters.
Yeah,
but-
Tom
No, I know
regarded-
that.
yeah.
I've always called them half sisters, but I think that's probably
Yeah,
my
I know.
way.
they're
no,
too close
Tom
to
regarded
Yeah.
them as sisters.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He would have
Especially
regarded
Molly and I. Molly and I were very close.
when you went fighting.
Yeah, but that was love-hate. We had a love-hate relationship. But Molly, more so Molly to me than me to Molly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, oh yes. No, I know where it came from.
You know where it
Oh,
came from?
yes.
Yeah. Molly and I were very close. Yeah. Where, I don't know why. I don't know why.
No, it's often hard to pick those things. There's sort of it's just something that clicks.
Yeah. Molly was always...
And but it's interesting when I look at their kids who you like. You
Yeah.
like Carmel and you like
yeah.
Anne.
Yeah.
But you can take all the
Yeah,
rest.
but then that comes from Mum. See, Carmel and Anne were very close to Mum.
They were. That's true. That's true. They had that
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah, so therefore, that's continued down. Hello, Puss.
If you can get some
Hello.
attention, Alice, out of her, take it, because it's a rare
Hello,
thing.
Puss.
It's a rare thing indeed.
She's the captain walks alone, that one.
Yeah, she's a cat that walks alone. Hello, Puss.
I'm not sure I can think of anything else to ask at the moment. I've
Yeah.
printed out a list of names, but I really don't know what to do with it. So.
No, in fact, like, see, that goes down another generation now. Anne's on the phone regularly to me, She loves to keep that contact.
She does. She does. How many descendants did we work out? Over 90, wasn't it? Directly from Tom.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah. I can't remember
Down the
what
generations.
Yeah.